Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the 10-15 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out our live streams on YouTube every night around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I'll have a link just in the upper right here if you want to check out the streams. Last night was a little weird, if that's the most recent one you're watching this, because we had a little bit of internet outage, but most of the time goes for 4 or 5 hours. And I do put timestamps in the stream the next day as well, so if you can't watch the whole thing, then you can find out which champions that I played and at which minute. So if you just go through and you're like, did he play a Recon game, did he play a Jana game, whoever your favorite champion is, you can see if I played that champion. And if you just have time to watch 1 or 2 games, you can pick out the 2 that you think might be your favorite and go check those out on the replay. And then we also do guides for every guides frequently for champions, tier lists, patch notes. We have coaching replay sessions. There's all sorts of content, so be sure to check all that out. Okay, so not a ton is going to change for most supports as far as the overall meta. I still think we're heading towards an ardent meta here. There are a couple of notable changes that will help out some of the supports that we're going to mention. Lilia's out. I don't think she's going to affect the support meta that much. I don't think she's going to be a strong support. Gragas, we'll talk about him near the end of the video. He might be able to be played as a support in some circumstances. He did get a little bit of a buff. Skarner as maybe a spicy off-meta pick. People could try that out as support. Swain, I think, is a pretty big nerf. I talked about that in the patch notes. Not going to rehash that here. Thresh got hit a little bit as support, and Yuumi got a really, really big buff, and we'll talk about her right away. She's my top pick for this patch. And then Frostfang ended up getting some pretty nice buffs as well. So 25% extra mana regen at level 1 when you come to lane. That's really strong for certain champs that really need that mana, like Sona, like Nami, like Yuumi. It's going to help them out a decent chunk. And then whenever you complete this in the mid game, you get an extra 5 AP as well, which is about 110 extra gold. So pretty good value there. But overall, the meta's not going to shift that much, but a few champions will shift around a bit in a couple of spots. Okay, so just a real quick meta overview. I talked about this last video, but I think for the last, 5 or 6 patches or so, we've been transitioning more towards an Ardent Sensor meta. So Enchanters are going to be very strong. You'll notice that a lot of my top-end picks are going to be Enchanters, and a lot of the highest win rate champs as of the last patch on 10-14. If we look over here in solo queue, a lot of those are going to be Enchanters as well, right? Especially the ones that have pretty strong representation of play, right? We've got Sona up near the top, Janna, Lulu, Soraka, and then some things that counter Enchanters like Blitzcrank are up there, and Bard, whatever he is up there as well. But Enchanters in general are going to be very strong. So there are a couple of things going for this. First of all, the Guardian buffs, maybe 3 or 4 patches ago, were very, very strong on Enchanters. It protects them quite a lot. They buffed the shield amount by a pretty good margin. They did nerf that back a couple of patches ago, but they also extended the range, which made it a lot more friendly for ranged champions, so now it's very easy to trigger it. They did get rid of the movement speed buff on it, which I thought was going to be a bigger deal than it really is. Just having the extra activation range and also having a bigger shield, I think, is more valuable than that movement range was in retrospect. Also, Boots of Swiftness are very good on a lot of these Enchanter champions. It allows them to reposition much more often. It's just so much better than Moby Boots and some of these longer, grindier fights that Enchanters really like, where you're just kind of hacking through tanks and just doing front-to-back team fights, which I think are coming back into style. So Swiftness Boots help out a ton there. And then Athene's and Ardent Sensor are just really good, cost-efficient items that are just, frankly, overpowered on the right types of champs. I just recently did a video a couple weeks ago, if you want to check that out in my in my video list. I might put a link in the description as well, that are Enchanter items and why they're so strong, and it sort of details and does the math for you on why Enchanter items are so good. So be sure to check that out if you want more information. I just don't want to get too far in the weeds here, because I do want to get to the actual champions. Tanky junglers like Nunu, Volibear, and Kayn are all still really strong. None of those got nerfed on this patch. So that makes Enchanters even stronger, because the more resistances and effective health that your teammates have, the stronger Enchanters are going to be. So you'd much rather be healing and shielding somebody who has 3,000 health and 200 armor versus someone who has 2,000 health and 100 armor, just because your heals and shields are going to be much more effective in those scenarios. And once again, I talk about that in that Enchanter item video, but you really, really want tanks in the meta. When Enchanters are strong, tanks are strong, is what I'm trying to say. And then you have tanky top laners as well. You still have Darius, Garen, Wukong, Volibear top are all still very strong. So there's a high probability that you're going to get one, and often both of these roles are going to be kind of tanky, bruiser type of champs. You have healing everywhere. So you have Conquer, Ravenous Hunter, Triumph, Death's Dance, Blade of the Ruined King, Spirit Visage, and just goes on and on and on. And that means that fights get extended. They go longer and longer. Champions are going to be tankier, which means that enchanters are going to be stronger and longer fights. Jungle pathing now favors going to top side. The vast majority of junglers will start at the bottom side buff, and then they'll path top, gank top, fight over scuttle, and basically stay out of bot lane for the first 4 minutes. Occasionally, someone will come down and go for a cheeky gank early level 2 or level 3, but it's really rare most of the time for that, more so than it has been in the past at least. And they did nerf some early game junglers, most notably Lee Sin, on this patch. So that means that you get left alone bottom, there's less harassment, that means there's more opportunities for you to push, get priority, and poke people out as double ranged in the bot lane. So that really heavily favors things like Yuumi, Sona, Janna, Lulu, a lot of the top end champs, because you're going to be level 3 or level 4 before the jungler even has a chance to come down there and look at you. With a lot of the way that pathing is laid out. So that really favors them because they're weakest in the early game, particularly to ganks, some of these enchanters. And then ADC, so in general, a lot of the more common, more powerful ADCs right now are these sort of auto-attack ADCs, so champs that are going to do really well with Ardent Sensors, so like Ashe is the most notable one, but then you have like Jinx kind of rising up a little bit in power, Draven, Vayne, Kog'Maw, a lot of these champs are moving up a bit. So once again, going to make Ardent Sensor better. And then Nautilus and Leona just really aren't doing so hot. And those are two of the best champions outside of Blitzcrank. And those are two of the most popular champions as well against enchanters. And both of those have fairly low win rates right now. So you have Nautilus, who's popular at 50%. Leona's popular at 50%. And they just don't put out the damage that they used to be able to put out to punish the enchanters early in the game. And so that means that enchanters are going to be even better. As long as you can play around Blitzcrank, just either ban him, or with Boots of Swiftness, it allows you to dodge those hooks a bit easier. It just sets up really well for enchanters. So the number one pick that I think overall transitioning to the tier list is Yuumi. And I know a lot of people might scratch their heads on this, and I know that Jolty's going to be, just rolling his eyes at this long-time viewer of the channel that he's out there every night supporting the channel. Great guy. We love him in the community, but he has a love-hate relationship with Yuumi. He plays Yuumi a lot, but also, complains about her being really weak all the time too. And Yuumi is kind of enigmatic for a lot of people because she does have this low win rate, but I'll always point back anytime people ask about that, and I say she's a strong champion, and all these pro players are saying that she's a strong champion, she has a high ban rate, is that sometimes the win rate doesn't say everything about a champion's potential, and that's the key word there, is potential. Because when she's played correctly, she is very, very difficult to deal with because there's so many different ways that she provides threat on her team. And that kind of goes against the common misconception that Yuumi is really easy to play. A lot of memes came out when she was first released where people could just, attach to somebody and just go AFK and just get carried and win the game. But that's not really the case with her. And the biggest part about this is her risk profile is she's much more dangerous than a lot of the other enchanters because she's basically melee a lot of the time. And what I mean by that is when you're running around and it's YOLO queue and people are constantly making bad decisions, they're diving towers, they're chasing into no vision, they're starting fights that are uneven or just really poor fights. Most enchanters, like Karma, like Janna, they can kind of tag along a little bit, throw a couple of shields in there, but they can hang back and say, you know what, this Lee Sin is a fool. He's, about to dive this tower. I'll throw a shield and try to help him, but I'm not going all in, right? I'm going to back up. I'm going to leave him. So I'll throw a shield so he doesn't spam ping me after he dies. Maybe. He probably will anyways. Let's be real. But I'm not dying. Either way, I'm getting out of there. With Yuumi, you can't do that. You are committed. If you're going to help somebody, you're committed to the fight. So you can't, there are no half measures with Yuumi in these little small skirmishes, right? So when you attach to that Lee Sin who's diving, if it's a bad dive and he dies, you die. And that's where the skill comes in, is learning how to jump off with Yuumi and not get baited into bad situations because you are going to die in bad situations. It's also very difficult to roam on her, and it's very difficult to ward on her subsequently, because if you get caught out, once again, people in lower elos, they don't help you ward. If you're trying to go up and ward dragon by yourself and you walk over a ward, and their junglers around, they're probably going to hop a wall and kill you most of the time. So it's just really easy to get hard punished for bad positioning and bad decisions as you me, if you detach or if you follow somebody who's making a bad decision. And that's where the skill comes in, and that's why she has the low win rate, is because people just get caught and they die a lot. I'm not sure if it shows like average deaths or something in here, but I would virtually guarantee that it's going to be higher. I don't know if it has in here. There's probably somewhere you could find data for that, but I would guess that it's going to be higher than a lot of the other comparable champions out there, and just because people get baited into those situations. But when played really well, she's extremely difficult to deal with, because the weakness of most enchanters is that they are vulnerable, particularly in team fights, to getting picked off, right? If you're Janna or you're Lulu or something and Talon jumps over a wall and blows you up, or Zed or Rengar or whatever, then it's very difficult to position around that for most enchanters. And so you can kill them. You have an answer to them in the mid to late game. You just pick them off and kill them when they're trying to ward or whatever else. But you me, if played properly, if you get someone to go help you ward, if you stay attached to people, if you only get involved in good, winning, clean team fights, then she's almost impossible to deal with, because you can't directly attack her when she stays attached. And so that gets rid of one of her weaknesses, and she brings a lot to the table. She gives extra AP or AD, adaptive force, to whoever you're attached to. So that means that she can help AD champion scale, she can help AP champion scale. She's got something for everybody. Same thing with Zoomies. You have a heal, which is pretty respectable, up to 210 heal, but you also have 45% attack speed, and usually at least 25 to 30% move speed. So that means she's just good with anybody, right? You can put her on Vayne, heal, give the attack speed, give the move speed. You can put her on Darius, give that move speed, get him in there to attack. You put her on Diana, you put her on Syndra. I mean, really anybody. She just fits so well with any comp in the mid to late game. And then Final Chapter is this huge, like, Sona ult that roots for longer than Sona, and it has a much bigger hitbox than Sona, and I believe it does more damage if you hit them with every wave than Sona's ult. And you can reposition while you're casting it, so it's much harder to flash that, because you can just follow them if they flash it. So she has all these things going for her. She has all this power built into her kit. She can't be targeted. And she doesn't have to take boots or take flash, because she is attached to people all the time. So that means she gets an extra combat summoner. So it's really hard to fight her if she has Ignite and Exhaust, or Ignite and Heal, and the ADC has another combat summoner. Then you're going to have 3 combat summoners to 2. 3 to 2. And the fact that she doesn't have to take boots saves at least 900 gold. So that means that she's going to get to that Ardent Censer faster. She's going to get to that Athene's Unholy Grail faster than other people. So she just has all of these traits that give her extra power and extra advantages over almost every other champion in the game. Just so flexible, so powerful. So it's like, yeah, sure, they might be able to punish you early on in the game, but they probably won't, right? If you're playing against an Ezreal or a Vayne or a lot of these other weak early game champions, which is what's probably going to happen, and the enemy jungler doesn't even come down till 4 or 5 minutes, you're going to get a free pass early on in the game. And even if they do kill you a lot early, it doesn't take much, right? If you just have an Ardent Censer and your Darius in the top lane's 5-0, just go attach to Darius in the mid game. Go help him win, right? Your Syndra's fed, go help the Syndra win. Whoever it is, you can play around him in the mid game. Whether you're ahead, whether you're behind, you're still relevant. And it's difficult to pick you off. It's difficult to make you pay for being behind. And because you have that extra 900 gold cushion, you're going to get your items most of the time. And on this patch specifically, they buffed up her mana a huge amount, a massive amount of extra mana in the laning phase, if you think about how her trade patterns actually work. So what they've tried to do with Yuumi is they've tried to acknowledge that, okay, she's too strong because she can't be targeted, particularly in pro play, so how do we deal with this? So their approach has been, well, let's constrain her mana. Let's force her to jump off and use her passive to generate extra mana, or else she's going to run out of mana and she's going to be useless in fights. So a few patches ago, they made it to where her E costs 15% of her maximum mana in order to activate. So the goal there was it would not allow you to spam E to speed up whoever around the map and chase people down. If you did that, you'd probably run out of mana in team fights. Or if you're against like poke champions like a Xerath or a Vel'Koz or something like that, in theory they could poke you out, because if you're having to heal through Xerath and Vel'Koz poke, you're going to run out of mana before they do. It's because your E costs like 300 mana or something crazy in the mid to late game, right? And so that was the counterplay to Yuumi. It was like, okay, you just poke her from a distance, or you just kite her out and just don't let her chase you down. Well, now they've kind of gone back on that a little bit, and they are increasing the mana restoration on her passive by a very large amount. So it goes from mana restore 50. I guess it's not like ultra large in the early game, but it seems like a pretty good chunk. So if you have like 400 mana in the early game, 8% of 400 is going to be 32. So I guess it's not that much. That would give you 52 mana restore, 8% of your maximum mana. And the cooldown is dropped by 2 seconds at all ranks. So you get to use it a little bit more. I didn't notice that the base number had dropped off. I thought it was the same base and they added on 8% extra mana. But they did drop the base a little bit. However, she is going to... she's still going to get mana flow, and she's still going to get presence of mind. So that's ultimately going to give her, in the mid game, I don't know, 1,500 mana or something like that after all of your items are combined. And so 1,500 mana, 8% of that is going to be closer to like 120 mana or something like that. So if you were getting, beforehand 80 mana, now you might be getting 150. So in the mid game, it is going to help ease your mana a little bit. And in the laning phase, it is going to give you a little bit more mana, especially if you get a Dark Seal early for that extra flat mana. It's going to help you out a little bit, and you can activate it more often. But even before this buff, I still think she was really strong in solo queue, just because of all those traits that I just mentioned. So yeah, in theory, she's going to have a low win rate, but just keep in mind that the entire time everyone was crying about Akali being OP and being too strong, she had a negative win rate. I don't know if Akali ever had a positive win rate after the changes. Same thing with Irelia. Irelia may have crossed into positive territory for a little bit, but most of the time she was negative. Urgot, negative. All of these champions that were considered really OP for about a year all had negative win rates. And it's because the best case scenario was too strong, but most people, they were risky champions, and most people just did not play them well. And it's the same thing as Yuumi. So it's not like her mechanics are that hard, but it's the decision making and the assessing risk and managing risk that is harder with her. Being able to abandon somebody, having the discipline to know that you need help to go ward, or that you're going to have to lower your effective vision range, right, in order to be safer. It's just a price that you have to pay with Yuumi a lot of times. So anyways, I think that she is really strong. And I'll have a link to this Google Doc in the description. I forgot to mention that as well. But I would probably still stick with the same runes. I would run no boots on her, Frostfang, and then probably Athene's Ardent Censer most of the time. And then you can do either Shirelia's or Redemption after that. And I would just go with Aerie, Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, and Scorch if you think you can do a lot of harassment during the laning phase. You can change Absolute Focus out for Transcendence if you want to play more for the mid game, and you can change out Scorch for Gathering Storm. If you just know you're going to lose the lane pretty hard and you're not looking to do any extra damage, you can do that. But I think that she can put down some pretty strong pressure in the early game. But yeah, she's going to be my pick, and the biggest thing is she just saves that gold, that 900 gold, and she's just so difficult to kill. I mean, what they're ultimately going to have to do, they keep playing these games with mana. It's like, just make the W limited time. I've said it over and over and over again. You can attach for 5 seconds, and then you're off. And it's got like a 5-second cooldown before you can reattach. That's it. And whenever you attach to somebody, you give them empowered things. So like maybe when you attach, you give them maybe free movement speed, right? So you increase their movement speed for a few seconds. Or you give them that free attack speed. Or something like that. Just give them some piece of your E for free whenever you attach. Maybe you increase those numbers. I don't know. But just give her windows of vulnerability. Make her buy boots. Make her consider her positioning in fights. Just do not let her permanently attach. I mean, maybe if she triggers her passive, it could reset her ability to attach. Or if she gets an assist, it could reset her ability to attach. Something like that. But she has to have real windows of vulnerability, because right now, in a lot of fights, it's just not there. You know, in the late game, how often do you really have to cast spells, right? Like when you're chasing somebody down, you can Q them, hit the slow, and then you can E to speed someone up to get close to them. You ult, you know, to snare them so that your team can kill them. Boom, you get a reset on a portion of your mana, reattach, maybe heal one more time, Q one more time, kill somebody else when you run them down, get another reset, get your mana back. It's like in a really, really long fight, she's probably going to run out of juice, but that's just not a really good way to balance her, I don't think. There's just too many runes. Unless you just want to nerf... Presence of Mind is the real problem. If you really want to limit her by mana, you're going to have to nerf Presence of Mind. And it's going to be a shame if they do that, but if they want to play the mana game, that's what they're going to have to do, is nerf Presence of Mind. But I think just let her attach for 5 seconds and then unattach and just be done with it. Just say, hey, the limiting factor is that she's too safe too much of the time. Just limit her safety. That's it. Maybe when she attaches those W, they could double the value or something. Maybe for that limited time, that 5 seconds, instead of getting a free, like, 20 adaptive force, maybe she gives out 40 or 50 adaptive force. Whatever the number is, just a bigger number for a limited time. But, anyways. And then just balance the rest of it around that. Like, lower the mana costs across the board. Maybe make the Q travel a little bit faster when it's not attached to people. Maybe give it a bigger slow. You know, just tweak it like that. Make her other stuff more independently strong when she's not attached, but then also make it stronger when she does attach. Give it that like really big pop, that window of power, kind of like Lulu's E on somebody. Gives them a shield and a really big on-hit bonus with picks. And that would be really cool, because then she could jump in and out, dodge stuff, get rid of the she can't attach for 5 seconds if she gets CC'd. Stuff like that. But anyways, even in her current state, very strong. Okay, Soraka's the other one that I want to mention, and I think that Soraka is super strong right now, and she's a lot easier to play than Yuumi is. She still requires some careful positioning, but Soraka's just almost impossible to shut down. I mean, you really have to sit on her all game and just turbo gank her lane, because if she gets out of lane, she's almost impossible to stop. Once she gets to 2 items, it's like lights out against most champs. She gets the Thenes, and then she gets whatever, Mikhail's Redemption, Ardent Sensor, all of them are good on her. And the stuff that she brings to the table, and she's going to be a pretty good Frostfang user if you want to switch over to Frostfang on her too, is that her Star Call is super cheap in the laning phase. They buff the mana cost, so she can just spam Star Call. It's good harassment. It's got good range on it at 800. It's really hard for people to counter you whenever you use that, because it's on a pretty low cooldown. You can throw it from a long range, and you still have your E to help protect you. Her W doesn't cost any health anymore if you hit a Q in team fights later on in the game, so around like level 9 or level 10 when this is maxed out. It used to cost you, you know, between 100 to 150 health every time you used it, depending on your max health. Now it doesn't cost you anything. So if you used 4 heals before, it might be 600 damage to yourself, true damage. So effectively, instead of having 1500 health in a fight, you'd really have like 900 health if you use 5 heals. But now you have that full 1500 again. So she's getting a lot of extra health, usually between 30 to 50% extra health, just because she's not damaging herself anymore, which is massive. It makes her much, much harder to kill in these late game fights. And not only that, she does still heal herself for quite a bit too off of her Q. So she just has one of the strongest single target healing in the game, because not only is its base pretty high at 220, and it also applies the self heal to the target. So when this is at like 2 or 3 points, it's plus 70 and then 220 there. So that's 290 with a 0.9 AP ratio, which is good, but it's on a 2-second cooldown. You know, most heals and shields in the game are going to be like 8 seconds or so. If you think of Lulu, Karma, Jana, if you have some displacements, they're like 8 seconds, right? This is 2 seconds. So you can just chain spam this heal, and it's just so hard to burst through this, because she's going to have Wish as well, which, you know, in the mid game is going to heal for 375. And then she's going to be spamming this on somebody, and then usually she has Redemption as well, for an extra bit. So if you engage on somebody, she can silence to stop you from immediately casting spells, start a Redemption on them, use Wish. It's just kind of this huge burst heal, W to heal them, Redemption hits them, and then you heal them a couple more times with your W. It's like you got to cut through an extra 2,000 or 3,000 health to kill somebody, and then she just scales so well with plus healing and shielding because she has 3 different ways to heal with her Q, her W, and her R, and Redemption, and she's got Revitalize. So she just scales so hard. It's so difficult to deal with her. And the fact that she can go Guardian now adds an extra shield into the mix so that it's even harder to burst them down. And it's harder to burst her down because she can drop the Redemption on herself. You can take Barrier on her, which also scales with plus healing and shielding. She can ult herself to heal for a lot. And she takes Boots of Swiftness. And the Q gives you extra movement speed whenever you land the Q. So it's a lot harder than people think it is to pick her off and blow her up. Somebody needs to be ultra fed, or you have to hard chain CC her. And the fact that she can hang out so far in the back, I mean, it's 550 range on the heal, and the Q, or the Q is like 800 range. It's just really hard to get a hold of her and kill her. Now, there are some champs that can do it, most notably like Blitzcrank or some of those other hook champions, but, you know, if the enemy team's running tanks, it's going to be hard to catch her, right? A lot of the time. And if your team is running tanks as Soraka, then they're never going to kill your tanks. So even if they do get some kind of Grievous Wounds effect, she still does a ton of healing, even if it's reduced by 40%. So she's just super hard to deal with. Anytime you trade in the laning phase, if they don't kill you, you win the trade. Basically, all it takes is 1 Q. You just land 1 Q, and you're going to, you know, put your ADC back up to full health. So she's just one of the best champs. She has great harass in the laning phase, great scaling, great global presence with her ult. Excellent counter to Karthus, who's coming back and becoming popular in the jungle. Is really good with the runes out there. You can run Guardian, Revitalize package, and then I like running Ghost Poro and Ultimate Hunter. Ultimate Hunter is so good on her because you can get those stacks really early on through your global presence with Wish. So if you Wish and there's a 2v2 going on top lane, not only can you turn that fight around and, you know, potentially get 2 assists, which is extra gold, but you also get 2 stacks on Ulti Hunter, which is going to reduce the cooldown by, like, I don't know, an extra 10% or so. So, yeah, super strong champion right now. I'd highly recommend trying out Soraka. And then the key is really Boots of Swiftness. And then usually I like going Athenes, but you could go Redemption first. If it's going to be a lot of YOLO Q and you want that extra semi-global pressure, that can be pretty good. Okay, Lulu's the next one that I want to talk about, and she was #1 last patch, and I still think she is really good as well. She is going to be a bit more vulnerable. She is a bit more dependent on like you having a quality ADC, or at least somebody who can use attack speed really well. Because a lot of Lulu's power comes from being able to speed somebody up with their Whimsy, and then being able to give them that extra on-hit damage in the mid-game, that extra 80 or so on-hit damage. It's pretty strong. It's on attack, so it doesn't work with Hurricane or Ginsu's, but it's basically on attack, or on hit. Extra damage. So you want an 80 carry that is going to be getting a lot of attack speed, and it's just going to benefit from that movement really well. And her Wild Growth is a single target, like huge infusion of health that's a knock-up as well. So she's really good at protecting a single target that is a really high priority and buffing up that single target by a very large amount of DPS. So someone like a Kog'Maw or a Twitch, Vayne, Kai'Sa, all of these are really good candidates. Not as good with someone like Jhin. You can make it work. He does like the movement speed, but the attack speed's not happening that much. And she's going to be a little bit weaker if you have a mage type of champ like a LeBlanc or a Diana, or even something like a Talon or a Zed. Like you can definitely help them. You can throw a shield on them, speed them up, you know, wild growth them, but she really thrives particularly on those ranged champions, or just anyone who's going to auto attack a lot. Master Yi could work pretty well too, or Kindred. But all of her stuff is single target, so you got to keep that in mind. Whereas Soraka has this ult, you know, that's going to heal your entire team for a combined like 5,000 health or something in the mid game. You've got Yuumi, who has this AoE, you know, CC that's going to help out a ton of people there in the mid game. And then you have Karma, who can do this AoE shield, which is going to speed up everyone on your team and give everyone a pretty good sized shield. And then you have Janna, who can potentially heal up your whole team with her ult. So all of these other champs have AoE abilities, and they all scale really well with plus healing and shielding. Lulu doesn't scale that well with plus heal against shielding. She only has one ability that benefits from that. So she has her E, which is a shield, but then her ult is an infusion of health. So it does not benefit from plus healing and shielding. It doesn't get reduced by grievous wounds either, which is nice. But that can be a problem. And she doesn't have a heal in the laning phase. So if you're getting poked out by a Sona, a Soraka, a Yuumi, or whatever, all of them have heals. She doesn't. So you can get bullied in the early game, particularly against some of these like ranged harassment champions. So stuff like Jin, particularly with his grenade bouncing. Ezreal, if he's really good at hitting those Qs. The mage supports, your Luxes, your Zerats, Vel'Kozes, all of that stuff is going to be really bad for you in the laning phase. So she does have a few more bad matchups. She is a little bit slower than some of the other champs. Her like major cooldown is this Whimsy. That's where her real power comes from. It's on a 12-second cooldown versus Yuumi has a very similar ability which gives movement speed and attack speed. That's on an 8-second cooldown, and it heals him on the same ability. And her Q is basically dead weight. Like, it can harass a little bit in the first few levels, but after that, it really doesn't do much. It's a minor slow, but it's pretty bad later on compared to some of these other champs who all have, each one of their abilities is pretty strong. So you kind of got a dead ability, you kind of got some long cooldowns, you're very heavily focused on single target, but in the right circumstances, she's super OP, right? If you have that Kog'Maw, if you have that Twitch, Jinx, Vayne, you know, there's a lot of ADCs that she works really well with, but your ADC has to do well. Like I said, you can make her work with like a Darius or a Set. You do have the speed up option. With Whimsy, you can use Wild Growth to help that, but she's just got a couple of more potential weaknesses than some of the other ones. But nevertheless, I think that she is very strong right now. Okay. Karma is another one that is really rising to prominence recently in kind of this push-poke comp. So she's good particularly with Ezreal or Caitlyn, just because she can push the waves so well. She's got the best pressure in the early game because your Q is so cheap and it's AoE. So it can hit the wave and splash to do damage to the entire back line. So I like to do, if you're really trying to go for this push, in the early game, whenever the wave comes up, you just Q that back line, and then someone like Caitlyn can just, you know, Q right through it, or Jen can just grenade it and just wipe it out really quick. So you can put them in their tower real fast, and that's going to allow you to rotate up and help your jungler fight for scuttle. It's going to give you a chance to go get some deep wards in the enemy jungle. It's going to give you a chance, if you feel safe, to harass them under towers. That's a great chance when they're trying to last hit and they don't have any minions in front of them. Then you can use your R for empowered Qs to get in there and do a ton of damage. She has really good gank assist, so if you just run up with your shield and then just do like an RW, you can heal for quite a lot, stick to them, and then you get a really good root duration as well off of that. So you get an extra 0.5 seconds off of that root, which is really nice in the early stages, and then I think at like level 6 it goes up a little bit more off of that. So you can get up to a 3.25 second root at level 16. So that is a pretty good option in the laning phase. It's a piece of CC that's pretty good duration, that's hard to avoid. She's got good harass with the Q. Her shield is really nice because it not only gives a shield, but it gives like quite a bit of movement speed too. So usually you want to do 3 points of Q in the laning phase, then max the shield later. And it'll end up giving you like a really big shield in the late game. I mean, at level 11, you're going to get 135 extra base on top of this, and this should be maxed by level 11. So that's a 335 shield with a 1.0 ratio on your main target, and then everyone else gets 30% of that. So if she's near like 2 other people, whoever you shield, then it's going to give each one of them like 100 extra shield. So it's going to be, you know, realistically like an 800 or 900 shield once you start taking AP into account there, and plus healing and shielding and all that stuff. So yeah, really, really good. Great abuser of Ardent Censer plus Athene's Unholy Grail. You can stack up Athene's really well with your Q, with your autos, with your W, and then distribute it really well with your shield to a bunch of different targets. And then, of course, with Ardent Censer, you do an overcasted shield in a team fight. It's going to heal everyone for a ton. Now, fun fact with all of these champions, which I think pretty much all of these should be running Guardian. Yuumi actually will run Airy most of the time, but with Soraka, Lulu, and Karma, I like running Guardian on them. And if you run Font of Life as your second tree, if you apply a slow to somebody and anyone auto attacks that person who's slowed, that counts as a heal from you. So it heals them, and that heal is going to trigger Ardent Sensor. So in a team fight, for example, if you hit somebody with Soraka with a Q, it applies a slow. Anyone auto attacks that person, they all get the Ardent Sensor buff. So you don't have to individually heal each person in order to get that buff. Particularly in skirmishes where you may not want to blow your ult, you may not want to blow your redemption if it's a pretty much done deal on a kill. Lulu, the same thing. You hit him with your Q, it's going to apply a slow. You can apply Ardent to everybody. So Ardent's going on everybody if you're taking the Font of Life build, right? With Guardian, Font, usually Conditioning or Second Wind, and then Revitalize. But yeah, Karma really good if you have that high pressure lane, you have that poke champ, the Ezreal, the Caitlyn, something like that. She's just really, really good at pressuring early game, and she's very good at speeding up people in the mid game too. So if you have the Darius, you have the set, you know, these meatballs that just want to run at people, she is pretty good. Now, her shield is a bit smaller when it's not empowered. She doesn't have a lot of AoE CC, potentially, and, you know, she can get out-healed by someone like a Soraka in the mid-game. But she's one of the queens of the YOLO Q skirmish because she can just be so fast with Inspire, and you can speed your whole team up like a mini Irelia's just to get in there and catch somebody who's out of position. So I think she's very, very good right now. Janna's the last one in Tier 1 that I'll mention. I think that she's very good if you happen to find yourself up against other hard engaged champs as someone who's playing Nautilus, someone who's playing Leona. I think that Janna is classically pretty good in those champs. And she's kind of the queen of disengage. So if your team already has a pretty good way to engage onto them and you don't need engage, you don't need to speed up, then she can be good. And she's also one of the best at working with split pushers and at rotating around the map in general, just because she gets a lot of extra movement speed off of her passive. And that works really well with Boots of Swiftness, which are very much in the meta right now. So how she works really well with split pushers is that she can afford to go up and get risky wards that champions like you, me, and Soraka, they can't go get those deep wards in the enemy jungle to help you protect the split pusher. Because if she gets caught out, if someone, you know, Kane spots her or something in the jungle, she's probably going to be able to get away because she's got her tornado, she's really fast in general, and in an emergency situation, she can just press ult and get out of there. So she can take a lot more risks than any of the other enchanters that we've mentioned so far because she has so much safety and disengage. So she can afford to get those deep wards, protect split pushers, set up for assassins in the enemy jungle, and she's very good at protecting against dives as well. So if you get those wards up, you know, for your split pushing Fiora, who's trying to, you know, get to top lane, and then they can't fight the Fiora, she's too far ahead, and you're trying to hold mid lane with your team with the other 4 people, and they try to hard engage on you with like a Sejuani or a Leona or whatever, you have some of the best tools to stop that engage than any other enchanter out there. You've got the Tornado to help you out with that, you've got your ult to help you out with that, usually she'll get a Shirelia's to help out with that, so she's got a lot of tools in her kit to just sort of manage positioning in fights. And then of course she has her ult for a really massive heal in addition to the reset. So that's what she brings to the table. It's just a lot of mobility, a lot of control, a lot of vision, and just a lot of safety. And she's just, it's almost impossible to get through her if you have the superior high scaling ranged comps. You've got the Kog'Maw, you've got a really fed Jinx, something like that. They're probably going to lose. It's going to be hard to come through. Now, the big problem with Janna, though, is in the early game, her shield is on a laughably long cooldown. It's a 16-second cooldown and goes down to 12. So you get hard punished for using this shield. And it's not even that big of a shield. It's okay. It's like 80. And it decays over time. So in longer fights, you start losing value on that shield after, like, 3/4 of a second. It's not even full value. So if the fight goes for a second and a half, you put the shield on somebody, I don't know the exact formula, but it probably already lost like 30 or 40 shield whenever you do that. Now she does give out a lot of extra bonus AD, so that's very good on crit champs, the champs that are going to be getting Infinity Edge and things like that. It's really strong because if they normally auto attack for, let's say, 50 AD, if you have 100 AP, it'll total 50 extra AD. It's like, okay, each auto attack does 50, but if you crit, then all of a sudden that auto attack just did 100, and if you have Infinity Edge, that auto attack just did like 125. my math might be off there, but y'all see what I'm saying, right? So crits are really good. That also makes her a lot better with AD caster type of champions or assassin type of champions. Champions who don't necessarily scale as well with attack speed, but they scale really well with raw AD. So someone like that would be Jen, who scales really well with raw AD. Someone like Zed, someone like Talon. The lethality Varus build, which has kind of fallen off a little bit, but she's pretty good with that too. Ezreal and his Q scales really well with that. So that kind of opens up some different synergies that some of the other champs that just boost attack speed, like Yuumi and Lulu, don't really have. Like, so she has much better synergy with the Zeds, the Talons, and stuff like that than those other two champs. So she's got a lot of unique properties. She is fairly weak early to poke because you don't have a heal, kind of like Lulu, and your shield's on an even longer cooldown early on. But she is probably one of the best against all-in champs. So against Leona, Nautilus, stuff like that, because the tornado can help stuff their engage. And it's really hard to gank her too because she's really fast and she can use that tornado to disrupt incoming junglers. She can use the W to disrupt. So she's got a lot of tools in the toolkit. So much better defensive capabilities, but a little bit more vulnerable in the lane. She can put out a lot of pressure. A lot of Jannas will take Comet with her early, and they'll even take like Cheap Shot, Scorch, Absolute Focus. You know, they'll get a lot of aggressive things like that potentially in the early game if you're against a bunch of melee champs or just other champs you think you can bully. And you can just walk up and spam your W on them, and it does pretty good damage over time. So she can be aggressive early. It's just she's going to fold to other people that are also ranged and aggressive, especially things like those hard poke champs, the Lux, Xerath, Vel'Koz. It's going to be kind of a tough matchup in the laning phase, although you will outscale them later on. Okay. A couple more champs. So Janna, pretty safe first pick or blind pick if you want to do that. You probably want to ban out Yuumi or Soraka if you want to do those, but she can hang with the other people, especially if you can make really good decisions around roaming, vision, and helping out split pushers. Okay, so Sona is going to be the highest win rate champion right now at Platinum and lower, or one of them. Not by a ton, but by a little bit. And basically, she's just very easy to execute. So she only has one skill shot with her ult, and everything else, she's just a huge stat stick, basically. You just spam your buttons, your Q, your W, in fights. It's nice if you optimize it, if you always power chord green to get that, 30-35% damage reduction. That is good. But even if you're just hitting them with the Q power chord, it's still going to be fine in a lot of fights. So yes, there is some nuance to her play. There is some, difference in really good Sona play and average Sona play. But her mechanics are very simple. It's all about positioning. Just don't get caught, don't die, and you probably win fights. Because her W puts out an insane amount of healing and shielding later on. The numbers are very small, so she's not for like small skirmishes. So in just like little 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 even, it's not going to look that impressive. But late game, if you have all 5 people around, this right here is going to be 220 heal to you and one other person, and then up to a 625 shield. So that's 850, 845 extra healing and shielding you're contributing, and that's going to be a total of 200% AP ratio, and it's going to be down as low as like a 3 or 4 second cooldown. So that's really, really strong. In an organized, like clean 5v5 team fight, she's pretty much the queen. I mean, she's even going to rival Soraka in a lot of instances, and just the raw amount of healing and shielding she can put out. And because a good chunk of that is a shield, then that means that she's not as vulnerable to grievous wounds as someone like a Soraka is. Now, Lulu and Janna also work around grievous, and Karma also work around grievous wounds a little bit better. But you got to be close, right? The radius on these, I don't know if it says what the radius is, but I feel like it's like 400 or 450. 400 radius on the aura. So it's very close. So that does make you vulnerable to AoE comps, so things like a Mumu, Cannon, Rumble, just a lot of these other champs where you're going to just be getting hit by random AoE. That can be problematic. So you got to be careful with your positioning. But she does a lot of harassment in the laning phase too. This Hymn of Valor can't miss. It's going to apply Airy. It's going to apply Scorch. It empowers your auto attacks to do extra damage. So she's really good at bullying out a lot of other champs. The problem is you really need an aggressive ADC with you because you want both people taking damage so that you actually get value out of this heal. Because if you're just healing yourself for 30 for 105 mana early on, if you touch one other person, it does drop down to 85 mana or 80 mana, 75 mana. It's 30 reduction. And that's really weak, right? When you compare this to a lot of other heals out there, potentially. So, but if you're healing 2 people, if all of a sudden you're healing 60 for 75, that's not too bad. And if you can do it actively in combat, if the Caitlyn's up there attacking with you, and the enemy's trading back, and you W, you get the heal value, and you get that shield value before it disappears. Now all of a sudden, that's worth it. That's 110 value for 75 mana, and it just gets stronger from there. So it's just a little bit more conditional on the heal. You got to have a little bit more help from your ally, or you have to have a ton of mana. So you definitely want to take Frostfang early and just get a bunch of fairy charms. Usually you're building towards Athene's Unholy Grail. She's great at stacking it. She puts out a ton of damage. She's probably the best Athene's user in the game, and she distributes it really well with her W. So she scales super well with Athene's, Ardent Censer, and Redemption. Excellent team fighter. Really good ultimate that complements the team fight. It's a nice, pretty big hit, 1.5 second stun. And she can help your team rotate pretty quickly with the E as long as you run around the map. Now, I will say I am not a big fan of going Lichbane or Tyr on Sona. I know some people love those items. I just think they're really inefficient compared to Athene's Unholy Grail and Ardent Censer, depending on the situation. So you can do it, but the problem is 850 mana. It does give you more mana for more spells, but you're just not building toward a reasonable item in the early game. So you're going to be 4 or 5 minutes behind the other enchanter. Like if Soraka just rushes straight Athene's and she gets hers by like 12 minutes, you're not going to get your Athene's by like 16 minutes if that's the case. So that's why I just don't like it. It just puts you behind the power curve, although it does give you a lot of mana. I think if you're just getting a bunch of fairy charms anyways, you're getting Athene's, which is going to have, you know, a bunch of fairy charms. You have Ardent Censer is going to have fairy charms. Redemption's going to have fairy charms. And I've even seen some people taking Presence of Mind on her lately, so going Cut Down and Presence of Mind. So these items do a lot of damage, the Archangel Staff and the Lichbane, but they just cost too much. They cost almost 50% more than other items. So check out my Enchanter itemization video once again if you want to know the power of items. And, you know, of course, build whatever you want, follow your heart, all that kind of stuff. But I just think that mathematically, in most situations, you're going to be better off going for the cheap items. You know, the 2,100 gold items, but or the 23 in the case of Ardent Censer, not the 3,200 gold items. But anyways, now, you know, if you're going to 6 items, if you're playing a 50-minute game every game, yeah, absolutely. If you got to pick any 6 items to slot into your inventory, sure, get your Death Cap, get your Lichbane, all that stuff. But realistically, if you just go through your op.gg, look at how much gold you're averaging per game all the time and think of that as a budget. Right, just say, hey, realistically, I'm only getting 10,000 gold a game as support on average. How do I want to budget that money? What do I want to spend that on? And if you're realistic about it, you're probably going to conclude that, you know, Athene's and Ardent Censer are just going to be a better bargain. They're just way more efficient. But anyways, that's my Sona soapbox. So she is very strong. I just have her down just a little bit more just because she does require, like I said, a bit more coordination in the early game. It's harder to take over the lane by yourself because you'll run out of mana early on. And she is vulnerable. She's more vulnerable than most of these other champs because she's relatively slow. She does have the speed up for the Song of Celerity. That's nice. But she doesn't have as many ways to protect herself as some of these other champs, and she takes a bit longer to come online. But she offers a little bit less utility to the team than someone like a Yuumi or a Lulu. She doesn't have steroids to buff up the ADC or the bruiser or the jungler or whatever. She just relies on her items, but she does do very well with items. Okay, Blitzcrank, very one-dimensional champion. You land your hook, you're a god. You miss your hook, you're completely worthless. So, you know, if that's how you like to roll, if that's your champ, if you're really good on him, then, you know, he can be excellent in this meta. He's very, very good against enchanters because you grab them, it's basically 100% they're going to die, right? Even if they flash a lot of the times, usually if you start your animation for that knock-up, you get to finish that auto attack even if they flash. And you're going to get those kills. So he's a lot worse against things like Nautilus and Leona, especially in the mid to late game, because You know, they can just activate gargoyles and then turn it around and start CCing your team. But against these squishy champs, he is very good, especially against Yuumi. If you hook the person Yuumi's attached to and you kill that person, usually Yuumi is probably going to die as well. So, Blitzcrank very strong right now. Just the standard, you know, Blitzcrank build. Just, I mean, really all you need are mobility boots, and then just buy whatever you want after that. But a lot of people do end up going for either a Zeke's or a Knight's Vow, just for a little bit of extra utility for your team. I have tried something like going for a like a Twin Shadows or a GLP build, just to give you a better probability of hitting your hooks. I'm not really sure about that. You are a bit squishier in that case, and those items are a bit more expensive, but I think that's something that's really underexplored, because Blitzcrank does have a very good AP ratio on his Q. It's 100%, and his ult's also 100%. So that just contributes to you being able to blow people up a lot faster if you have those items. So, I don't know. Maybe it's too cute to go for something like GLP, but most people just go tank on Blitzcrank. Okay, Leona's another one that I think can work. Yes, she doesn't have a great win rate in solo queue right now, but if you do get ahead, if you can snowball on the Soraka or the Yuumi, if you don't want to play the late game, if you want to win by 20 minutes, I think that she can still be a really good option, especially paired with something aggressive like a Draven or a Misfortune. She's going to be able to kill those enchanters early. The problem is, once they get to 2 or 3 items, you're just going to lose. Pretty much. You're just not going to be able to get them and kill them in team fights most of the time. Now, if the enemy has a lot of squishy people on their team, if they're running like a double assassin comp, you know, like a Fizz middle, and then Kha'Zix in the jungle or whatever, she's going to probably be good for the whole game, because you'll still likely be able to CC them long enough for your team to blow them up, even through healing. But if they have something like a Nunu or, you know, Ornn or Shin or something top lane, they just have like a couple of tanks, then she's not going to be as strong later on. So I think she can be good, but you got to pressure, you got to get ahead, you got to snowball early. You can't just sit there and chill. And the problem is, and especially in like gold and lower, the ADCs are just going to sit there and chill, right? It's going to be Ezreal who's just farming off in the lane, or Caitlyn who's farming off, and you're just going to be sitting there, you know, watching that Soraka, you know, farm it up with whoever, you know, Lucian or whoever's on the other side there, and you're just going to feel hopeless, because you're like, well, we probably just lost this game. if you don't kill the Enchanter 3 times in the first 15 minutes, you're probably going to lose the game. But she is a very high risk, high reward champion if you like that. Nautilus is very similar. He does have a bit more guaranteed value later on. They can't flash your ultimate. You're going to hit them with it, and it can CC and knock up multiple targets. He does do a bit more damage later on in fights as well with his E. There's pretty good AoE damage. So similar CC to Leona, not as much damage in the early game, not as much damage mitigation in the early game. Leona's W makes her virtually impossible to kill when Aftershock's up. But he can still do very well. And he is doing pretty well in Pro right now. Also, if we look at this, you know, well, the latest patch, he was 43%. But I think the one before that, yeah, he was 55% before that. So he is pretty good in higher low brackets. It's just lower low brackets, kind of like Leona. You got to pressure. You got to get ahead early, or you're probably going to lose the game. He can still be pretty good. Now, Recon, I can't really put my finger on it, but I've been losing a lot as Recon lately, and I was, you know, pretty dang good on Recon for the last couple of years. So I'm not 100% sure what it is exactly that's going on here. Maybe I'm just rusty on him. But he's not getting any pro play either, and his like win rate is down to like 50%. It had been 51, so hasn't moved around a lot. He still does have very good engage, but I just think that he just gets outscaled by the Yuumi and the Soraka. And in the past, you could have just engaged on them, right? You could have just run at him and killed him. I think a lot of what it is the Guardian change actually favors them so much, like Boots of Swiftness as well. Like, it's so hard to catch them out of position. So the Boots of Swiftness and the Guardian, and more of them are taking Barrier these days. And so, you know, if the Soraka has Barrier and Boots of Swiftness and Guardian, even if you engage on her, like, it's so hard for your team to blow her up before she's able to reset. So I think that's what it is. I think it's just a lot harder to blow people up. And people just... ADCs in general are a little bit weaker, and people aren't playing Assassins as much either. And I feel like in longer fights, you know, if you're trying to hack your team's trying to hack their way through like a Sejuani or something for 15 seconds, he's just not going to bring as much to the table as a lot of the other enchanters are. So he was very good in a meta that was dominated by assassins, particularly AD assassins, and I feel like he was actually pretty good against Leona and Nautilus. I know people thought that they countered Recon, but I always did very well against them, and I feel like he does a lot better against them than some of like the Lulus and the Yumis who are just going to outscale you. So I don't know. I've had some problems with Recon lately. I do think he can still be really good, but I would probably only pick him in a Nautilus, Leona, or like Blitzcrank if you're really scared to pick an enchanter. So yeah, that's just what I think. He's a little bit weaker, but he can still be good. The last 5 minutes here, what does hit Sona? She can be good. My opinion of her, she's a high pressure early game champion. A lot of people go for the grasp into the frozen mallet bill or whatever that item is. I think it's frozen mallet. I don't know. It just feels like really gimmicky to me. She can be very strong, but I feel like she falls off later, and I would just rather, if I wanted to play high pressure early, I'd play something like Karma instead. I just feel like they bring a bit more utility to the table, but she is an AD champion. She can take Umbral, which is really good for vision control, though most people don't do that. They go for that frozen mallet, so I don't know. She can work right now. She does have a pretty good win rate at 51%. So you can play her if you like. She's kind of like Karma, really good with poke champions, your Ezreals, your Caitlyn's, your Jins, and stuff like that. I think that she can be strong, but she has a very high pressure. You got to take over the game early. She does have a bit of scaling, with her ult as a shield, and she's got to heal with her Q, but I feel like just her itemization just doesn't scale as well as some of the enchanters later on. So you better crush them early, and you better end the game. She does take towers extremely well, though, with that long range, so I will say that. And the AD, she can melt towers a lot faster than other enchanters. Okay. Bard's pretty good. I'm not 100% sure what's up with him, why he always seems to have a pretty good win rate, why he's getting played in pro right now. He doesn't scale that well, but if you do high pressure, early on, like a lot of the other champions, you do have very good roam potential. You have some interesting gank paths you can help your jungler with by coming through the walls. You have good engage with your ultimate, and he can build kind of tanky with like the Dead Man's Plate. So he has like some interesting builds, although as you'll notice, most people do not do the Dead Man's Plate early on. It's just Swiftness, Athene's Redemption, a more classic kind of build. You do scale with the Meeps. He does put out pretty good damage for basically an enchanter. It's just like the AP ratios are pretty bad on him. The fact that your E and your R have no AD ratio, and then your Q and your W aren't that great. So yeah, I mean, you can't. I don't know. The Deadmans, they all have pretty high win rates. Like whether you're going Athene's or Deadmans or Redemption, Deadmans does have a little bit of a higher win rate than Athene's Unholy Grail does. The reason Deadmans is interesting is just because it gives you a lot of extra movement speed to collect your chimes. So it's almost like you're getting double mobility boots. And since you don't scale that well with AP anyways, then just having that extra little bit of safety is nice. And I think you do a little bit of extra damage as well. You don't do the slow, but you do the damage as a ranged champ. So he's okay. He's got a few weird builds going on out there. Most people have moved away from rapid fire cannon as well. Some people are going Deadman's rapid fire. That's still happening some, but you can go like Deadman's Athene's or Deadman's Redemption if you want to do that. So he brings a lot of utility to the table, but you got to practice him a lot. You got to be really good with him, and you got to close out the game early. You notice that win rate here is like very nice, the 20 to 25 minute mark, but then it falls down quite a lot around that 35 to 40 minute mark. So like a lot of these other champs that are in tier 3 and lower tier 2, you really got to pressure early to get ahead and close out the game. Last few champs. Nami's okay. She has long cooldowns, basically single target possibility for maybe a couple of targets on her heal, on her W. I mean, she's just a high pressure early game champ. She only has one heal, doesn't scale that well with plus healing and shielding, so I don't know. She's okay. It's not that she's terrible, it's just that the meta is not built around her right now. It's really kind of more about the scaling ADCs and just playing something that works really like optimally with Athene's and Ardent. She's okay with those. I just feel like the other enchanters are just a little bit better right now, but she's still okay. That nerf to her movement speed, taking it from 60 all the way down to 45, was pretty rough. That hurts her utility a lot, especially in the mid to late game. Pike is okay if you snowball really hard. I did think that Pike was going to have a much higher win rate on this patch than he did. It turns out it didn't matter that much. But he's still good. You know, if you're able to land those hooks, you can snowball early, but your items are expensive. If you don't get those kills, you don't get the extra gold, you're going to fall behind. But he does have really good roam potential. He's very mobile. He can escape. He can get the deep vision. He can get Umbral Glaive in order to control the enemy vision really well. So he definitely has a lot of potential, but it is risky to go for those stuns, especially in team fights. If you hook somebody and you try to go in with your E, you might just get blown up. So he's okay, but you know, just like I keep saying with the other champs, you got to do well early because you are going to get outscaled. Zyra, I kind of have here as an honorable mention. You could put Brand here as well, but I really don't like AP champs right now, but I just want to put one on there. I think it's silver and lower. You can still maybe dominate with her, but like a lot of these other champs, she has good early game, good pressure, but you get outscaled hard later on. Your items are very expensive. But Zyra is even immobile, and she has a hard time rotating, a hard time getting good vision without getting ganked, and there's just so much mobility right now with junglers and extra blast cones and people jumping over walls. The mobility creep over the last few years has just really hurt her a ton, because not only is she immobile herself, but like her one piece of CC, her E, reliable CC, her E is very easy for the enemy to dodge. If they just strafe it or they can flash it, it's very slow and it's got a slender hitbox. So she's okay, but she's much better in a powerhouse early game meta in the bot lane, and that's just not where we are right now. And then a couple of the weird ones that I was just kind of thinking about that could work. I do think people have been doing Nunu mid. I do think that Nunu bottom could be a thing. I haven't tried it yet, but the premise here would be that you could gank your own lane with the snowball. So you could walk out like you're going to go ward, and then they would have to back up and respect you. So if you just hang out like in that river bush, then they probably can't step. You can still be in experience range, but if they step up too close, you can snowball and run them down. So this would be very good if they don't have a way to disrupt that snowball. So not as good against something like a Soraka that can silence it, but against something like a Yumi or you know, maybe a Karma or a Lulu, just some of these champs that can't really do a lot about it, just rolling at them with that snowball. You know, just ganking your own lane with the snowball or ganking your lane with the jungler if they come down is just huge, right? And even if you take kind of some bad trades in the laning phase, you can just Q, eat a minion, heal it up. I mean, your E provides really good CC, really good gank assist, so you do scale pretty well. You can get enchanter items and still be very good. I mean, you can get something like a Knight's Vow or an Ardent Censer and be pretty strong, because once again, if you have Font of Life, if you apply a slow to somebody, which you do on almost all of your abilities as Nunu, Ardent Censer works. He has a really good AP ratio, so the AP is good on him. He has a strong self-heal with his Q and a really strong shield with his ult, so the plus healing and shielding's good there. So I think that's something that not a lot of people have thought about. People are aware of the Nunu mid, but Nunu bot, I mean, Proto Belt, there's this potential there. You'd have to try it out. You can also go contest Scuttle and eat it yourself, especially lower elos where people aren't doing that. You can help secure dragons. You know, if you're afraid that your jungler is going to miss the smite on the dragon, you can just chomp it. You can go steal enemy jungle camps. You're going in there to ward. Something like that. Maybe you could, you know, just chomp one of their golems or something. Walk by, chomp a raptor. I mean, there's just a couple of little, like, niche scenarios where he could be pretty good. So I'm not saying that you always want to play him, but particularly against some of these other melee champs like the maybe like the Leona or the Nautilus, you can stop hook champions fairly decently. If they're going to hook into you, you just W and that snowball is going to knock them out. Especially someone like a Leona. So he's got some potential. I'm not saying he's mad. I'm not even saying he's good. I'm just saying, you know, maybe question mark, give him a try. Another one could be Skarner. Skarner did get buffed on this patch, so it's primarily jungle. I don't know if that's going to make a big splash in the jungle, but one of the changes to him that was pretty interesting was that his E no longer is slowed when it goes through a target. So you could fish for potential slows and a stun through the minion wave. So you could throw your E through the wave, which would do, and you might see Skarner top off of this as well. It does. That's the biggest buff to him. Is it goes through that. You can fish for the hits. They not allow you to wave clear pretty fast. After you hit everything with the E, you can just walk up and auto attack it, and it's pretty good damage. Overall, he does have a point click suppression, so they have to have Quicksilver Sash. Cleanse does not work against that. Mikhail's does not work against the suppression. And he does a lot more percentage-based damage, and this is really one of the key things, is that they like nerfed his AD ratio, and they buffed his percentage max health damage with the Q. So what that means is you don't have to build things like Trinity Force to get any real damage on him anymore. So as a support, you know, you could go for Knight's Vow would kind of make sense. You could even go for, I don't know, like Spooky Ghost or something, maybe just to slow people down so you can run in. You could go for Irelia's potentially on him. He does have a shield in his kit. You know, so you could go for Righteous Glory. That could be good on him. So I think there are some options. You could try out the new Predator on him with Ingenious Hunter, so that you get more sweeper action. You combine that with a Redemption or something, maybe. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just bad. I don't know. But like the fact that he does have a potential AoE stun, like a pretty good stun, pretty high base damage now with the percentage health. And if you get those fractures on people, it's a good stun and a really good suppression that not only basically like stuns somebody, but you can pull them all the way back into your team. I'm not sure. I assume that something like Irelia's is disabled whenever you grab them, but you might be able to Irelia's first, like right when you're on top of them. Irelia's first, grab them, and then while you have the movement speed, just run back with it and run them back even further. I'm not sure if that works. Or if that's even good. But I don't know. It just feels like maybe there's some options. So you're going to get blown out by Enchanters doing that. You're just going to give them a free lane. But, you know, against something like a Leona or a Nautilus, maybe. I don't know. It's probably bad. But that, you know, I was just thinking maybe that's a step closer to being able to support. And then, I mean, who knows? Maybe if you run Gargoyle Stoneplate or something, maybe that works. Who knows? And then Gragas is the last one as support that I'll mention, where he has been played as support before. He did get a couple of AP buffs. I still don't think he's going to be that great, but once again, if you're looking for a counter to the Leona and the Nautilus and you want to try something a little spicy, I think he could be a pick. You know, he does have pretty good wave clear with his Q. His W is borderline worthless. I mean, it does give you some resistances. It's okay. His E is probably one of the main attractions. It stops movement. So when people are trying to gap close on you, Triss is trying to jump on you, Leona is trying to, you know, hook you, or Nautilus or Thresh or whatever is trying to get on your AD carry, you can just E into them and knock them out of that. And then, of course, your R can be used for engage or disengage. So I think he has some potential in there. I feel like it's probably not quite there, but it could be a fun thing to mess around with. So, anyways, I'm going to try to give you, you know, every patch now, just a couple of spicy off-meta picks. Just something to think about. I know people ask me that in chat. People like to hear the all-caps vid. So, just to reiterate, not recommending you play this if you're actually trying to climb and gain a lot of elo. But if you just want to play something fun, you just want to kind of YOLO with your friends or just try something different, I think that these could be some decent options for you. So, okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. I'll have a couple more videos here linked at the end if you want to check those out. The stream starts every night around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come by. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hang out. And we'll see you next time. Have a good day.